Revenge isn't loud, it's precise.
You know that awful jolt in your gut when you step into a room and instantly know the world just tilted against you? Like when the dog goes strange before a quake? Or when your mom uses your full name? That's exactly what hit me as soon as I walked into the Meridian Grand Ballroom, gripping an overpriced gift like an idiot. The place dripped wealth, massive crystal chandeliers spilling light across marble floors so glossy they could double as mirrors. It was the kind of over-the-top luxury that screams, too much money, no common sense. Every guest looked like they'd been lifted straight from the covers of Forbes or Vogue, depending on whether their cash came from stocks or style. I'd hunted for weeks to find this necklace, a custom piece from some Italian jeweler whose name I could barely say without coughing. The kind of thing that costs more than a car and requires its own insurance rider. Sarah, my wife, had once pointed it out in a magazine at breakfast 6 months back. Just a passing comment. But husbands remember. We file that stuff away and chase it down like it's a mission. It took me 20 minutes to wrap the box in silver paper. I write code worth millions, but folding paper around cardboard had me sweating. Still, it didn't look too bad. Tied off with a ribbon that, foot for foot, cost more than most lunches. I slid through the crowd, nodding to people I half recognized and dodging cheek kisses from strangers I'd forgotten minutes after meeting. But there was this buzz in the air, the kind of tension you feel when everyone's in on a joke except you. Conversations broke off when I passed, then picked back up in whispers. A sure sign that something ugly was brewing. The laughter started before I even saw it. Not the light, champagne kind, but the cruel, hard kind that makes your stomach clench. The sound of people enjoying someone else's wreck. I followed the noise toward the stage at the front, probably meant for speeches about the night's charity cause. And then I saw him, Benjamin Cross, 6'2" of smug perfection, down on one knee like the star of some cheap romance flick. Except this wasn't Netflix. This was my life. He had a mic in his hand, his voice booming across the ballroom. "Will you leave your useless, weak husband and marry me?" The word smashed into me. Useless? Weak? I'd made this man richer just by working in the same industry. My patents alone could have covered his last yacht. And weak? Not even close. But truth didn't matter here. This was a performance. And I was the punchline. The crowd devoured it. 400 of Manhattan's elite united in delight at my public gutting. Phones came out fast, because why just watch when you can post someone's ruin in 4K? My marriage was about to go viral, and then the blow landed. Sarah, my wife of 7 years. The same woman who asked me that morning if her dress looked okay. The same one I'd just bought a necklace worth a small fortune for. She looked at Cross with a smile I'd never seen. Not her morning coffee smile. Not her wedding day smile. Something sharper, alive in a way that gutted me. "Yes," she said. Clear, strong, into the mic. The ballroom erupted. Applause, cheers, whistles. Like they'd just seen the game-winning touchdown. I stood frozen, holding that shiny gift box, while my wife accepted another man's proposal in front of hundreds who thought my destruction was the best show in town. Cross rose, pulled her into a kiss straight out of Hollywood, and the room went wild. Someone shouted. Someone else started a slow clap that turned into a roar. And me? I stood there like I'd wandered into the wrong theater, stuck in a nightmare I couldn't walk out of. The easy move would have been to blow up, hurl the box at Cross's perfect hair, yell something cutting, make a scene big enough to ruin their spotlight. That's what everyone wanted. That's what they were waiting for. Nothing delights the wealthy more than seeing someone else break apart in front of them. But here's the thing about working in tech for 15 years. You learn patience. You learn that payback doesn't come loud or fast. It comes careful, steady, and sharp enough to cut clean. The kind of strike that lands when no one sees it coming. So instead of giving them the meltdown they wanted, the dramatic confrontation they were all secretly recording on their phones, I did something that probably confused the hell out of everyone in that room. I turned around. No shouting, no scene, no thrown objects or dramatic declarations. I just pivoted on my heel like I was leaving a particularly boring board meeting and started walking toward the exit. The gift box stayed firmly in my hands because damned if I was going to leave behind 3 months' salary worth of Italian craftsmanship for these vultures to pick over. The crowd's energy shifted as I moved. You could feel the confusion rippling through the room like a wave. This wasn't the script they'd expected. Where was the rage, the tears, the public breakdown that would give them something to gossip about for months? I kept walking. past the champagne fountain that probably cost more than most people's annual rent, past the ice sculptures that were already starting to melt under the heat of everyone's anticipation, past the string quartet that had stopped playing to watch the drama unfold. My footsteps echoed on the marble, steady, deliberate, completely unbothered. Behind me, I could hear Cross trying to restart the party atmosphere, his voice booming through the microphone about love conquering all and new beginnings. Classic CEO move. When in doubt, give a speech. But even his practiced charisma couldn't quite cover the awkward energy I'd left in my wake. The doorman, different guy than usual, probably hired special for tonight, opened the massive brass doors for me with a look of professional confusion. I nodded my thanks and stepped out into the cool Manhattan night, where the city's honest chaos felt refreshingly real compared to the manufactured drama I'd just escaped. My Uber was already waiting. I'd called it the moment I heard Cross's voice on that microphone because I may be a lot of things, but stupid isn't one of them. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror as I settled into the back seat, probably wondering why someone was leaving such a fancy party so early, still clutching a silver gift box like it contained the secrets of the universe. Rough night? He asked because Uber drivers in New York have apparently never met a personal boundary they couldn't cross. Getting better by the minute, I told him, and meant it. As we pulled away from the Grand Meridian, I caught a glimpse of the ballroom through the massive windows. The party was back in full swing. Cross and Sarah probably already planning their future while the crowd celebrated their successful humiliation of the guy who'd just walked out. They thought they'd won something tonight. Poor fools had no idea what was coming. The gift box sat in my lap, still perfectly wrapped, still unopened. Inside was a necklace that Sarah would never wear, bought by a husband who apparently no longer existed, but that was fine. I had other plans for my money now, better plans. Plans that didn't involve funding my own public humiliation or buying jewelry for women who thought pathetic and impotent, were accurate descriptions of the man who'd built their entire lifestyle from scratch. The city lights blurred past the window as we headed uptown, and, for the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Clarity. Tonight had been a gift in its own twisted way. Sarah and Cross had just handed me the justification I needed to do what I'd been too polite, too civilized, too stupidly loyal to do before. They wanted to play games with my life? Perfect. I'd been playing games since before Cross learned how to tie his first necktie, and I'd never lost one yet. The real party was just getting started. My penthouse felt different when I walked in. Not physically. The same ridiculously expensive furniture Sarah had insisted on was still there. The same pretentious art pieces that cost more than most people's houses were still hanging on the walls like silent judgments. But the energy had shifted. The place felt lighter somehow, like someone had finally opened a window in a room that had been slowly suffocating for years. I tossed the silver gift box onto the kitchen counter without ceremony, letting it land with a satisfying thud next to a bowl of fruit that probably cost $50 because everything in Sarah's world had to be organic, artisanal, and Instagram-worthy. The necklace could stay wrapped forever for all I cared. Maybe I'd turn it into a paperweight or a very expensive reminder of my own stupidity. The marble countertops gleamed under the recessed lighting, reflecting my face back at me in a dozen different angles. I looked tired, which made sense considering I'd just watched my marriage implode in front of Manhattan's social elite. But underneath the exhaustion, there was something else. Something that looked suspiciously like relief. I poured myself 3 fingers of 25-year-old Macallan. The good stuff. The bottle Sarah always told guests was David's little hobby, like collecting premium scotch was equivalent to building model trains in the basement. Tonight, it wasn't a hobby. It was medicinal. The burn felt good going down, honest in a way that nothing else had been for months, maybe years. I'd been lying to myself for so long about what my marriage had become that I'd forgotten what truth actually tasted like. Turns out it tastes like expensive whiskey and vindication. My office was at the far end of the penthouse, past the living room that looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest, and the dining room we'd used maybe 6 times in the past year. Sarah preferred eating out, being seen. She called it networking, though I'd started to suspect her networking involved a lot more one-on-one meetings with certain billionaire CEOs than I'd originally thought. The office was the only room in the place that was actually mine. Sarah had decorated everything else with the help of some hotshot interior designer whose name she dropped constantly, but my office was off limits. Dark wood, leather chairs, shelves lined with actual books instead of decorative spines, and most importantly, a safe built into the wall behind a painting of the Brooklyn Bridge. Because even my safe had to have some style, according to my wife. I sat down at my desk, the same one I'd bought when TechFlow was still operating out of a cramped office space in Soho, back when Sarah was still impressed by my entrepreneurial spirit, instead of embarrassed by my lack of social connections. The wood was scarred from years of late nights, coffee rings, and the occasional moment of frustration when code refused to cooperate. Real wear, honest wear, not the fake distressing you pay extra for at overpriced furniture stores. The safe opened with a series of beeps, and I pulled out the black leather folder that had been sitting there for 3 years, untouched but not forgotten. The label read, "Primary Assets," in my own handwriting. Applied with a label maker on one of those nights when I couldn't sleep, and decided to organize my life like it was a filing cabinet. Sarah had laughed at me for it. "Who needs paper anymore, David? Everything's digital now." Turns out the guy who built his company from the ground up and didn't trust the cloud with his most important documents needs paper. The guy who remembered that lawyers love paper trails and judges prefer physical evidence needs paper. The guy who'd watched his wife making eyes at other men at charity galas for the past 6 months needs paper. I opened the folder and spread the contents across my desk like I was dealing a very expensive hand of poker. Every document told a story, and together they told the story of how a 24-year-old kid from Brooklyn with a computer science degree and too much ambition had built something worth $400 million. The original incorporation papers for TechFlow Solutions, filed 7 years ago when I was still naive enough to think love and business mixed well, my signature, Sarah's signature, and a witness signature from my college roommate who'd driven over at midnight to make it official. Sarah owned 49%, I owned 51%. Seemed fair at the time. Seemed romantic even. What wasn't in those original papers was the story of everything that came after. The patent applications I'd filed solo, working 18-hour days in a cramped office while Sarah handled business development at lunch meetings that always seemed to involve more martinis than contracts. 28 separate patents, all with my name as the primary inventor, all generating revenue that had funded our lifestyle, our penthouse, our ridiculous grocery bills. The bank statements painted an even clearer picture. The initial funding for TechFlow had come from my savings, my student loan money, my grandmother's inheritance that she'd left specifically for me to chase my dreams. Not our dreams. My dreams. Gran had been smart enough to put that in writing, bless her practical heart. $250,000. Every penny documented and traced directly to company operations. Then came the investment rounds, Series A, Series B, Series C. Each one negotiated and closed by me while Sarah handled public relations. The investors' names were all there in black and white, along with the contracts that spelled out exactly who owned what. The math was simple, even if the legal language was dense. David Chen owned 85% of TechFlow Solutions. Sarah Monroe owned 15%. Mostly as a gesture of marital goodwill that was looking pretty stupid in hindsight. I pulled out my laptop and opened the company's financial management system. The same system I designed, the same one Sarah had never bothered to learn how to use. Too complicated, she'd always said. That's what we pay accountants for. Except we didn't pay accountants to make executive decisions about where our money went. And the system required C-level authorization for any transfer over $15,000. Guess who had been happily clicking approve on vacation packages, designer shopping sprees, and mysterious consulting fees without reading the fine print? The first stop was easy, the company travel account. Sarah and Cross had a business retreat scheduled for next week in the Caribbean. Business retreat, right? Because the best place to discuss quarterly projections is obviously a 5-star resort, where the only quarterly thing anyone cares about is how many mojitos they can fit into 15 minutes of poolside networking. 2 clicks, 1 authorization code, and suddenly Benjamin Cross was going to be vacationing alone. The resort booking, the first-class flights, the mysterious spa package that cost more than most people's rent. All of it canceled with the cold efficiency that only comes from truly excellent software design. Next up, tonight's party. The little humiliation spectacular at the Grand Meridian hadn't been cheap. The ballroom rental, the catering, the flowers, the string quartet, the ice sculptures, everything had been charged to TechFlow's corporate events account, which, according to the receipts, had been Sarah's idea of a networking opportunity that would enhance the company's profile in the community. Well, mission accomplished, honey. The company's profile was definitely enhanced, just not in the way you were hoping. Stop payment orders are beautiful things when you know how to file them properly. Each vendor got the same automated message. Payment canceled due to unauthorized use of corporate funds. The florist, the caterer, the venue, even the photographer who'd probably captured my moment of public humiliation in high-definition glory. All of them were about to discover that networking events don't pay for themselves. But the real nuclear option was sitting right there in front of me, glowing on my laptop screen like the business equivalent of a big red button marked "Do Not Press." The operational account. $400 million managed by executive override, requiring my personal authorization for any withdrawal over $75,000. Sarah thought she was the CEO. The board thought she was the CEO. Hell, half the tech blogs in Manhattan thought she was the CEO. But being the public face of a company and actually running it are two very different things, and the difference is usually measured in who controls the money. I'd built multiple fail-safes into the system, partly because I'm paranoid and partly because I'd watched too many startups get destroyed by internal politics. Every major decision required two signatures, mine and Sarah's. Every financial transfer needed executive authorization. Every change to company structure needed board approval. It was bulletproof, assuming both executives were operating in good faith. Turns out, good faith is harder to find than I'd thought. The freeze took exactly 30 seconds to implement. One dialog box, one confirmation screen, one final click, and suddenly TechFlow Solutions was operating under emergency financial protocols. No transfers, no payments, no access to operational funds without direct authorization from the primary stakeholder. That would be me, in case anyone was wondering. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails piling up like digital snow. Sarah's name flashed on the screen, then crosses, then numbers I didn't recognize but could probably guess. The party was probably still going strong, but somewhere in the Grand Meridian ballroom, someone was getting very bad news about their credit cards. I turned the phone face down and poured another scotch. Outside, Manhattan glittered like a circuit board, millions of lights representing millions of lives, most of them more honest than the one I'd been living for the past few years. The city never slept, which was perfect because I had a feeling I'd be up for a while. The folders sat open on my desk, papers scattered like evidence in a crime scene, which, in a way, they were. Sarah and Cross had committed the perfect crime. They'd stolen my life, my dignity, and my trust, all while making me pay for the privilege. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed that being married to someone meant you owned them, that signing a few papers made you equal partners regardless of who did the actual work. They'd forgotten that, in business, like in code, the person who builds the system gets to decide how it runs. And I was just getting started. I woke up at dawn feeling better than I had in months, which probably says something deeply concerning about the state of my marriage. Sorry, former marriage, but I wasn't in the mood for self-analysis. The morning light streaming through my floor-to-ceiling windows felt different somehow. Cleaner, like someone had finally washed away months of accumulated BS from the glass. My phone looked like it had survived a digital apocalypse. 57 missed calls, 94 text messages, and enough voicemails to fill a small novel about betrayal, panic, and what I could only assume was a lot of very creative swearing. Sarah's name dominated the call log like a desperate ex trying to explain why she'd keyed your car, followed by Cross, our CFO Janet Morrison, 3 different board members, and because this nightmare couldn't get any more surreal, my mother-in-law, Diana Monroe. Calling me was like receiving a personal invitation to my own execution. That woman had never liked me. Never thought I was good enough for her precious daughter, never missed an opportunity to mention how much more successful Cross was at dinner parties. The fact that she was calling now, probably to gloat about last night's public humiliation, was just the cherry on top of this whole crap show Sunday. I turned the phone face down and went to make coffee instead. Real coffee, not the pretentious single-origin, small-batch artisanal nonsense that Sarah insisted on buying from some hipster cafe in Brooklyn where they charged $15 for what was essentially hot bean water with an attitude problem. Just good old-fashioned dark roast that could wake the dead and didn't require a screwing thesis on terroir to justify its existence. The kitchen felt enormous without Sarah's morning routine cluttering it up. No yoga mats spread across the marble floors. No blender full of whatever green smoothie was trending on her Instagram feed that week. No passive-aggressive notes about whose turn it was to replace the water filter. Just me, my coffee, and the satisfying silence of a life that was finally my own. I'd spent the night doing math, which sounds boring until you realize that math, when applied correctly, can be the most devastating weapon in the world. Sarah thought she destroyed me last night, but she'd actually just handed me the justification I needed to use every legal tool in my considerable arsenal. The numbers didn't lie. I own 85% of a company worth more than some small country's GDP, and I just locked down every penny of it. The best part? It was all completely legal. Bulletproof, actually. I'd learned a long time ago that the difference between revenge and justice is usually just a matter of paperwork. And I'd always been very, very good at paperwork. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Patrick from the front desk, which meant someone was downstairs trying to get up to see me. Given the current state of my social calendar, this couldn't be good news. Morning, Mr. Chen. Patrick's voice crackled through the intercom with the kind of professional concern that only comes from years of dealing with Manhattan's elite during their various personal crises. Got a young lady down here, Emma Rodriguez. Says she works for your wife. She's pretty upset, sir. Emma, Sarah's assistant. 28 years old, fresh out of Columbia with an MBA she'd probably never get to use because she'd hitched her wagon to the wrong star. Smart kid, but with terrible judgment in employers. I felt a little bad about what was probably happening to her right now. She'd gotten caught in the crossfire of a war she didn't even know was being fought. Send her up, Patrick. Thanks. I had just enough time to put on actual clothes. Apparently, greeting crying employees in pajamas sends the wrong message about professional boundaries. Before Emma burst through my front door like a hurricane made of panic and designer handbags. She looked exactly like someone who just discovered that her boss's seemingly perfect life was actually a house of cards built on quicksand. Her usually immaculate hair was escaping from its ponytail. Her makeup was smudged like she'd been crying for hours, and she was clutching a Starbucks cup with the desperate intensity of someone who'd already had way too much caffeine and was about to have more anyway. Mr. Chen, thank God you're here, she babbled, words tumbling over each other like water through a broken dam. There's been some kind of technical glitch with the company accounts, and nobody can access anything. And the payroll is frozen. And the investor meeting this morning got canceled because the conference room booking didn't go through, and Sarah's Amex got declined at Starbucks. And she's completely freaking out because Cross's credit card got declined too, and their Caribbean trip got canceled. And Emma, I interrupted, holding up a hand. Breathe. She sucked in a lungful of air like she'd been underwater, then looked at me with the kind of desperate hope that people usually reserve for emergency room doctors or tax attorneys. Can you fix it? Sarah said it was probably just a technical glitch. Something with the servers, maybe, and that you'd be able to sort it out in a few minutes because you built all the systems. And did Sarah send you here? The question seemed to deflate her a little. Yes, sir. She said you'd want to know about the technical issues right away, and that you'd probably want to get everything back online before it affected business operations. Technical issues. That was rich. Sarah thought this was a bug in the system instead of a feature working exactly as designed. She'd spent so many years as the public face of TechFlow that she'd forgotten who actually built the damn thing in the first place. Emma, I said carefully, did you see what happened at the party last night? Her face went through about 6 different expressions in the space of 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, embarrassment, and finally a kind of sick understanding that made me feel genuinely sorry for her. She lowered her eyes and nodded, suddenly very interested in the pattern on my marble floor. I see. I walked over to my desk and pulled out a manila envelope I'd prepared while she was on her way up. Sometimes it pays to be 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. I need you to deliver this to Sarah. She has 24 hours to respond. No extensions, no negotiations, no, I need more time to think about it. 24 hours. Emma took the envelope like it might explode in her hands, which, considering its contents, wasn't that far from the truth. What should I tell her about the accounts? About the payroll? About the meetings? Tell her the truth, I said. Tell her there are no technical glitches. Tell her the system is working exactly as designed. Tell her that sometimes when you burn bridges, you discover you're standing on the wrong side of the river. She blinked at me, clearly trying to process the metaphor while simultaneously dealing with the reality that her comfortable job had just evaporated around her like morning mist. Mr. Chen, I don't understand. What's going on? I poured myself another cup of coffee and considered how to explain corporate warfare to someone who'd probably spent the last few years believing that business was just a series of lunch meetings and PowerPoint presentations. Emma was collateral damage in this whole mess. But she was also old enough to figure out which way the wind was blowing. Emma, how long have you been working for Sarah? 3 years, sir. And in those 3 years, how many major business decisions have you seen her make without consulting me first? She thought about it for a moment. her face cycling through the kind of realizations that usually come with a hefty dose of uncomfortable truth. I don't think I've seen her make any major decisions without you, sir. That's because she can't. TechFlow isn't Sarah's company, Emma. It never was. She's been the spokesperson, the public face, the person who smiles for the cameras and makes small talk at charity galas. But the code, the patents, the funding, the actual business decisions that matter, that's all been me from day one. I could practically see the gears turning in her head as she started connecting dots that had probably been sitting right in front of her for years. The way Sarah always deferred to me on technical matters. The way she needed my signature on everything important. The way she'd panic whenever I traveled for more than a few days. So when she and Mr. Cross, Emma couldn't quite finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. When she decided to humiliate me in front of 400 people while asking another man to marry her, yeah, that was a pretty clear signal that our business partnership was over. I sealed the envelope and handed it to her. This makes it official. Emma stood there for a moment, envelope in hand, looking like someone who'd just realized that the ground she'd been standing on was actually quicksand. What happens to the company? What happens to everyone's jobs? That depends entirely on how Sarah responds to what's in that envelope. But Emma, I waited until she looked me in the eye. Whatever happens, it won't be a technical glitch. She nodded slowly, understanding finally dawning on her face like a particularly brutal sunrise. 24 hours. 24 hours, I confirmed. And Emma, when you give this to Sarah, you might want to start updating your resume. Just a friendly suggestion. After she left, I stood at my window looking out at the city, coffee cup in hand, feeling the particular satisfaction that comes from watching a plan unfold exactly as designed. Somewhere across town, Sarah was probably still convinced that this was all some kind of mistake, some technical problem that could be fixed with a phone call or maybe a really good IT consultant. She was about to learn the difference between being the face of a company and actually owning it. The timer had started. 24 hours and counting.